The unexpected arrangement. The Valkyrian was the pride of the Terran Navy, a massive, state-of-the-art warship designed for deep space missions. Its engines hummed with power, its weapons could tear through an asteroid, and its crew was the best of the best. Ethan Carter, a skilled human engineer, walked through the long metallic corridors, his boots clicking against the floor. He had just arrived on the ship, assigned as the new chief systems specialist. It was a great honor, but he wasn't feeling excited. He had just read his room assignment, and something wasn't right. "This must be a mistake," he muttered, staring at the datapad in his hand. His quarters were not for one person. They were shared, and not just with anyone. His new roommate was Lieutenant Valera, an officer from the Xilari Empire. The Xilari were an alien species known for their elegance, beauty, and deadly intelligence. Their skin was smooth like polished obsidian, their eyes glowed like liquid gold, and their voices could make even the strongest men hesitate. But they were also known for their manipulative nature. They could twist words, deceive enemies, and control emotions like a weapon. Ethan groaned. He had heard plenty of stories about them, and none were good. He reached his assigned quarters and took a deep breath before pressing the door panel. The metal doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with sleek black furniture and an unusual scent in the air, a mix of exotic spices and something floral. Ethan's eyes quickly locked onto the tall, slender figure standing near the desk. Lieutenant Valera. She was stunning, even by human standards. Her midnight blue skin shimmered faintly under the lights, and her long, silvery hair flowed down her back. She wore the standard Xilari military uniform, which fit her slender yet toned form perfectly. But the way she stood, arms crossed, expression unreadable, made it clear she wasn't pleased either. Her golden eyes narrowed. "You must be the human." Ethan sighed, stepping inside. "And you must be the Xilari who took my room." Valera arched a delicate brow. "Your room. I was assigned here first." "So was I." He tossed his duffel bag onto the empty bed. Clearly, someone in command made a mistake. Valera's gaze flickered to the datapad on the table. She tapped it, bringing up the assignment records. Ethan leaned in, and sure enough, both their names were listed for quarters C-12. She exhaled sharply. "This is unacceptable." Ethan crossed his arms. "Tell me about it." An awkward silence filled the room. Neither wanted to be here, and neither trusted the other. Finally, Valera sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "We will speak to the captain. This will be fixed." Ethan nodded, agreed. But before they could leave, the ship's alarm blared loudly. Red emergency lights flashed across the walls. A voice echoed through the ship's comms. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Enemy distress signal detected. Prepare for immediate deployment." Ethan and Valera froze. The tension between them was momentarily replaced by something else: alertness. Valera turned to him, her golden eyes glowing slightly in the dim light. "Looks like we'll have to deal with this later." Ethan grabbed his engineering toolkit. "Yeah. Let's just hope we survive long enough to complain." Without another word, the two rushed out of the room, heading toward their battle stations. But deep down, Ethan knew this was just the beginning of a very long, very complicated assignment. Clashing worlds. Ethan Carter had worked with aliens before. He had even fought alongside them. But never had he been forced to share his personal space with one, especially a Xilari. As the Valkyrian hurtled through space towards the distress signal, Ethan and Valera found themselves in an uncomfortable truce. The moment they reached the bridge, their room issue became insignificant. The holo display showed a freighter floating lifelessly in the void. No distress beacons were active anymore, no signs of survivors, and worst of all, no signs of an enemy either. It was as if whatever had attacked the ship had vanished into the darkness. Captain Duran, a broad-shouldered man with grizzled gray hair and a cybernetic eye, stood with his arms crossed. His voice was deep and authoritative. "This doesn't sit right. No wreckage, no escape pods, just silence." Valera studied the display, her golden eyes narrowing. This could be a trap. Ethan frowned. Or a malfunction. Maybe they lost power, and their beacon failed. Joran turned to him. "Then that's your job, engineer. Take a team, board the freighter, and check for survivors. Lieutenant Valera, go with him." Ethan's stomach sank. Great. Now she's tagging along too. Valera, however, seemed just as displeased. "Captain, I fail to see why I should be." "Not a request, Lieutenant." Joran's gaze hardened. "You're both going." Dismissed. A mission in the dark. The boarding shuttle carried 4 personnel: Ethan, Valera, and 2 security officers, Corporal Reyes and Private Dren. As they approached the freighter, the ship loomed over them like a sleeping beast. Its hull was scarred with deep claw-like marks, its windows shattered, and its airlocks wide open. That wasn't a good sign. "No heat signatures," Reyes reported, checking his scanner. "No bodies either." That was worse. The shuttle docked, and as the airlock hissed open, cold, stale air rushed into their suits. The inside of the freighter was pitch dark, the corridors silent except for the distant, faint hum of flickering emergency lights. Ethan activated his wrist light, the beam cutting through the thick shadows. "Let's move." They advanced carefully, stepping over scattered crates and broken equipment. The walls were scratched, some parts melted. It looked less like a battle had taken place and more like something had ripped through the ship. Valera crouched beside a burned console, running her fingers along the damage. This wasn't from weapons fire. Ethan knelt beside her, studying the exposed wiring. "Yeah, this looks organic." Before they could analyze further, a sudden clatter echoed from deeper inside the ship. Everyone froze. Reyes immediately raised his rifle. Movement, 10 meters ahead. The team advanced slowly. Every step felt heavier. The corridor led to a large cargo bay, its high ceilings lost in darkness. The emergency lights flickered, and then they saw it. Bodies, rows of them, strapped to the walls. Their faces were frozen in silent horror, their eyes missing, as if something had pulled them out. Dren gagged. "By the stars. What did this?" Ethan swallowed hard. He had seen death before, but this was different. This wasn't war. This wasn't a fight. This was hunting. Then, a whisper. Not words, not a voice, but a slithering, scratching sound. Something was still here. The horror unleashed. The lights went out. Complete darkness swallowed them. Then, a deep metallic scraping sound filled the room, like claws dragging against steel. "Move. Back to the shuttle. Now." Reyes shouted. A shape lunged from the darkness. Dren screamed as something yanked him up into the shadows. A wet, crunching sound followed. His rifle clattered to the floor. Valera's eyes flashed in the dark, and she whipped out a blade, slicing at the unseen attacker. Ethan grabbed Reyes, dragging him toward the exit as the darkness shifted and moved around them. They reached the airlock, panting. "Close it. Close it." Reyes slammed the controls, and the heavy doors sealed shut, just as something massive slammed into them from the other side. The impact dented the metal. Ethan's breathing was ragged. What the hell was that? Valera, still gripping her blade, looked at him. Her usually calm expression was gone. For the first time since they met, Ethan saw something in her golden eyes. Fear. The first battle. The Valkyrian had seen many battles, but tonight, something unknown had boarded her steel corridors. Ethan Carter stood on the bridge, his pulse still racing from what had happened on the freighter. Dren was gone. Killed by something they never even saw. Something fast, silent, and deadly. Captain Joran stood stiffly, watching the holo display of the freighter. His cybernetic eye whirred softly as he analyzed the reports. "You saw no attackers. he asked. Valera, standing beside Ethan, crossed her arms. Not with our eyes. Ethan exhaled. But they were there. And they were hunting. A tense silence settled over the bridge. Then the ship's lights flickered. The Valkyrian was a fortress in space, armed with the most advanced defense systems in the Terran fleet. But as the lights dimmed and the computers glitched, something felt very wrong. The captain's voice was sharp. Status report. A young officer at the control panel frowned. Sir, we're detecting interference. System diagnostics show multiple malfunctions across the ship. Ethan's stomach dropped. Malfunctions. Now, this wasn't a coincidence. Unseen threats. Ethan rushed to a terminal and tapped into the engineering logs. His fingers flew across the console, bringing up the system failures. Communications are unstable. Weapon systems are acting up. Minor power surges across different sections. Valera stepped beside him, her golden eyes glowing faintly. They're already here. Ethan froze. What? She turned to Captain Joran. Permission to conduct a full security sweep. If these creatures got onto the freighter unnoticed, they may have found a way onto the Valkyrian as well. Joran hesitated. You think we have intruders? Ethan nodded grimly. I think we have a problem. The first attack. The captain didn't waste time. Security teams were sent to patrol the ship. Marines carried pulse rifles, scanning every corridor, every maintenance hatch. Ethan, accompanied by Valera, led a team toward the lower decks, where most of the power surges had been reported. The air was thick, too quiet, too still. Valera suddenly stopped. She tilted her head, her posture tensing. Something's moving. Ethan barely had time to process her words before the corridor plunged into darkness. A loud metallic shriek tore through the silence. Then, gunfire. The Marine in front of them, Private Kelso, was yanked into the shadows. His rifle clattered to the floor as his screams were abruptly cut off. Ethan stumbled backward, his heart hammering. We need to move. Valera drew her blade, her golden eyes now glowing fiercely. She moved with precision, her blade cutting through the dark like a silver streak. Then something lunged at Ethan. It was only a blur, barely visible in the flickering red emergency lights. A twisted, chitinous shape, long clawed fingers reaching for his throat. But before it could strike, a flash of silver cut through the air. Valera's blade sliced through the creature's chest, and it let out a horrifying screech, thick black ichor spilling onto the floor. The body collapsed, twitching. For the first time, Ethan got a good look at it. It was insectoid, covered in sleek black armor-like plating, with too many jointed limbs and a gaping jaw lined with serrated teeth. Its eyes were hollow. Valera wiped her blade on her sleeve, her breath controlled. They're already inside the ship. Ethan's fists clenched. Then we need to stop them before they take the whole damn thing. The sabotage uncovered. They reached engineering, where Ethan could get access to the ship's internal security systems. He started running scans, checking logs, searching for any signs of how the creatures got in. Then, he found it. A foreign signal embedded deep within the ship's system. A program running in the background, allowing something to bypass security protocols. His face paled. Someone let them in. Valera leaned over his shoulder, eyes narrowing. A traitor. The captain's last stand. Before they could report their findings, a sudden explosion rocked the ship. The Valkyrian's engines were hit. Alarms blared, and the ship's AI voice echoed through the halls. Warning. Critical systems compromised. Evacuate lower decks immediately. Ethan turned to Valera. This wasn't just an attack. This was an inside job. Someone on this ship is working with these creatures. Before she could reply, the bridge comms crackled to life. Captain Joran's voice came through, but it was strained, almost breathless. Carter, Valera, get to the bridge now. We have a problem. Then the line went dead. Ethan and Valera exchanged a look. This was just the beginning. Forced alliance. The Valkyrian was bleeding. Fire and smoke filled the corridors, the deck vibrating under Ethan Carter's boots as he sprinted toward the bridge. Valera ran beside him, her blade still slick with the ichor of the intruders. The emergency lights bathed everything in a pulsing red glow, making the shadows seem alive. But Ethan wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. He was afraid of who had let the monsters in. The bridge doors slid open, revealing a scene of chaos. Captain Joran stood at the command console, his cybernetic eye flickering with a damaged glow. His left arm was badly burned, and 3 crew members lay dead, their throats torn open by clawed hands. Valera's expression darkened. We were right. They're already here. Joran clenched his jaw, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. It's worse than that. He gestured to the main screen. Ethan's stomach twisted. The enemy fleet had arrived. Outside, just beyond the Valkyrian's damaged hull, 3 massive warships loomed in the void. Sleek, black, and alive-looking, they pulsed with a faint, sickly green glow. Their shapes were unnatural, shifting slightly as if their armor was made of something organic. The biomechanical monstrosities that had boarded the ship were just scouts. The real invasion was beginning. The enemy within. Ethan moved to a control station and began scanning the ship's systems. Communications were jammed. Weapons were down. Shields were fluctuating. Valera leaned over his shoulder, her voice low. They didn't just attack us. They infected the ship. Joran grimaced. That's not all. We have a traitor. Ethan's fingers tightened around the console. We figured that part out already. Valera's eyes gleamed dangerously. Who? Joran exhaled. We don't know yet, but they've been disabling our security grid, opening airlocks at random, and feeding the enemy our fleet positions. Ethan's hands moved over the control panel, tracing the corruption in the system. He wasn't a hacker, but he was a damn good engineer. The sabotage was subtle, hidden in layers of fake error messages and ghost commands. But there was a pattern. And then he found it. A single access point used over and over again. This came from inside the officer's deck, Ethan said, his voice tight. Only high-ranking personnel can access this level of controls. Valera's jaw tightened. Then it's someone on this bridge. Silence. Joran slowly turned, scanning the remaining officers. Some looked horrified, others tense. But one man, standing near the weapons console, stiffened just a little too much. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Lieutenant Commander Rylan. Betrayal revealed. Rylan's fingers twitched toward his belt. Too late. Valera moved faster than the human eye could track, slamming Rylan against the console and pinning a knife to his throat. Explain yourself, she hissed. Rylan, a man with sharp features and cold gray eyes, smirked despite the situation. Oh, Lieutenant, you really think you're the hunter in this room? The lights flickered violently. Then every screen on the bridge glitched, flashing eerie, green-tinted symbols. Ethan's hands flew across the controls. He's triggering something. Too late. The entire ship groaned as an unseen force hacked into the mainframe. The deck lurched beneath them. The Valkyrian was being overridden. The battle for control. Alarms blared. The enemy ships began moving forward, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Joran grabbed Rylan by the collar, yanking him away from the console. What did you do? Rylan laughed, even as Valera tightened the blade at his throat. I let them in, Captain. Humanity is finished. You're all just too stubborn to realize it. Ethan's heart pounded. He's locking us out of the system. We won't be able to fire back. Valera didn't hesitate. She drove her knee into Rylan's stomach, making him double over, then smashed the hilt of her knife against his temple. Rylan crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Joran snarled. Carter, tell me you can undo this. Ethan's fingers were a blur over the console, sweat forming on his brow. I can try, but they've already injected a failsafe. The enemy ships charged their weapons. The Valkyrian had seconds left. Think, think, think. Then it hit him. The backup systems. Ethan turned to Valera. You trust me? Her golden eyes locked onto his. A moment passed. Then she nodded. For now. Good enough. He grabbed a data cable and plugged it directly into the system's backup core. Valera covered him, standing guard as the remaining crew scrambled to fight off the intruders still aboard. The last second save. Ethan's hands flew over the keys. The failsafe was corrupting their weapons, but he didn't need the main systems. He just needed one shot. The enemy ships fired, a trio of massive energy blasts streaking toward the Valkyrian. Ethan overrode the emergency purge protocol. Now, the Valkyrian's engines roared as Ethan force rebooted the entire weapons system. For half a second, the ship was completely defenseless. Then, boom. The Valkyrian's cannons erupted to life, firing an explosive spread of kinetic rounds straight into the oncoming energy blasts. The enemy shots detonated mid-space. The ship shook violently as the shockwave passed, but they were still alive. The Valkyrian's weapons were back online. Ethan collapsed back against the console, panting. Valera extended a hand. Not bad. Human. He grinned weakly. Told you I was good at my job. Joran stepped forward, his voice iron-hard. Load all weapons. We're sending these bastards back to whatever hell they came from. The battle wasn't over. But now they had a fighting chance. The saboteur's identity. The Valkyrian was still standing, but the battle was far from over. Ethan Carter wiped sweat from his forehead, his hands still trembling from the emergency reboot. His mind raced. They had stopped the first strike, but the enemy wasn't finished. On the holo display, the 3 massive alien warships still hovered like predators circling their wounded prey. Their glowing green hulls pulsed ominously, shifting as if they were alive. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't just conquerors. They were infiltrators. And one of them was still on board. Valera's golden eyes flickered toward the unconscious form of Lieutenant Commander Rylan, still slumped against the bridge console. She crouched beside him, gripping the back of his collar and pulling him up. His head lolled, blood trickling from his split lip. His smirk, however, remained. You hit like a war beast, Lieutenant. Valera's expression remained cold. You are a disgrace. Captain Joran's cybernetic eye weird as he stepped forward. I should space you out of an airlock right now. Rylan laughed, though it was strained. You think killing me will save your ship. You think you've won. He coughed. You haven't even seen what they're truly capable of. Joran's fists clenched. Why, Rylan? What did they promise you? Rylan turned his sharp gray eyes toward the screen where the enemy ships loomed. They don't just take. They remake. Ethan's stomach twisted. Remake? Rylan's smirk widened. They evolve. They infect. And they start with your machines. A cold realization sank in Ethan's gut. The ship's malfunctions. The security failures. The airlocks opening at random. It wasn't just sabotage. The enemy wasn't attacking the Valkyrian. They were corrupting her. A race against time. Ethan whirled back to his console, running diagnostics. His fingers flew over the keys, pulling up system logs. His breath hitched as he saw it. A virus. An adaptive, organic-like code spreading through the ship's core. It wasn't destroying the systems. It was reprogramming them. Valera stepped beside him, sensing his unease. What did you find? Ethan's voice was tight. They're rewriting the ship's eye. If they finish, the Valkyrian won't be ours anymore. Joran's face darkened. Can you stop it? Ethan gritted his teeth. I can slow it down. Maybe. But the core is already infected. If I can't purge the virus completely, the ship will turn against us. Rylan chuckled. You're already too late. Before anyone could react, his hand shot out, pressing a hidden command on his wrist console. A piercing alarm blared across the ship. Ethan's screen flashed red. Critical system takeover in peroge. Then, the ship shuddered violently. The Valkyrian turns against them. The deck lurched as power fluctuations rippled through the ship. The emergency lights flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows across the bridge. Then, the AI's voice echoed through the speakers. New primary directive detected. Reconfiguring command authority. Ethan's heart pounded. No, no, no. He typed frantically, but the controls were already locking him out. Valera's eyes widened. They're taking control. The bridge doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. Joran spun toward Rylan, his face twisted in fury. What did you do? Rylan grinned, his lip bleeding. You think the Valkyrian is your ship? No, Captain. She belongs to them now. The holoscreen flashed, and outside, the alien warships began their final approach. They had been waiting for this, waiting for the Valkyrian to turn against her own crew. The fight for the core. Ethan's mind raced. They had to act fast. If the AI fully turned, the ship would fire on its own fleet. If they lost control, the Valkyrian would become a weapon against humanity. Valera turned to Joran. We need to get to the core. Joran nodded. Agreed. Carter, how much time do we have? Ethan glanced at the status bar. Less than 10 minutes before the AI is fully overwritten. Joran made a decision. Then we fight our way there. The bridge rumbled again as the ship's defense turrets activated against them. Breakout and betrayal. Before they could leave, Rylan made his move. He lunged at Joran, yanking the hidden knife from his belt. But Valera was faster. In a blur, she twisted behind him, grabbing his arm and slamming him to the floor. Her knife pressed to his throat, her voice deadly calm. Your betrayal ends here. Rylan panted, his smirk fading. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. Joran wiped blood from his chin and stepped forward, leveling his pistol at Rylan's head. I should end you right now. Ethan didn't argue, but Valera's gaze never wavered. No. Joran raised an eyebrow. No. Valera tightened her grip. Killing him now is a waste. We use him. Rylan laughed weakly. You think I'll help you? Valera leaned in close, her golden eyes gleaming. I think you're a coward. And cowards fear death more than anything else. She pressed the blade just enough to draw blood. You're going to help Carter stop the virus. Rylan swallowed. He had no doubt. If he refused, she wouldn't hesitate to finish the job. After a long, tense pause, he exhaled shakily. Fine. Final countdown. The bridge doors unlocked. Joran, Ethan, and Valera moved out, dragging Rylan with them. Time was running out. The Valkyrian was turning against them, and in less than 10 minutes, she would be their executioner. Betrayal and revelation. Time was running out. Ethan Carter ran through the dimly lit corridors of the Valkyrian, his pulse pounding in his ears. The AI corruption was spreading fast. In less than 10 minutes, the ship would be fully under enemy control. The ship was already fighting against them. Security doors slammed shut at random. Turrets turned on their own crew. Atmosphere controls fluctuated, suffocating entire sections. Ethan gritted his teeth. Keep moving. Behind him, Valera moved like a shadow, her blade in one hand, a pulse pistol in the other. Beside her, Captain Joran pressed forward, his injured arm held close to his chest. And then there was Rylan. The traitor. They had forced him to come, dragging him along because he knew the virus better than anyone. But Ethan didn't trust him. Neither did Valera. Her golden eyes barely left Rylan's face as they advanced. If he so much as twitched wrong, she would end him. But right now, they needed him. The gauntlet to the core. The AI core was deep in the lower decks, behind multiple security barriers. But as Ethan feared, Those barriers were already failing. They turned a corner and found themselves staring down a long corridor lined with defense turrets, all aimed at them. Rylan smirked. "Oops, looks like she's awake." Joran grabbed him by the collar and shoved him forward. "Shut them down. Now." Rylan's smirk wavered, but he approached a wall panel, tapping into the controls. Ethan held his breath. If Rylan betrayed them again, they were dead. The turrets whined, preparing to fire. Valera tightened her grip on her blade. Then, the turrets powered down. Ethan exhaled. "Okay, that bought us time. Let's go." They rushed forward, past the inactive defenses, but just as they reached the next door, boom! The floor shook violently as an explosion ripped through the deck below them. Ethan stumbled, catching himself on the wall. That wasn't the ship. Joran's voice was tight. That was an external impact. Ethan's heart sank. He turned toward the nearest holoscreen and pulled up external visuals. Outside, the enemy fleet had fired their first shot. The Valkyrian shields were still partially active, but the next shot would tear straight through them. Joran's face was grim. "We're out of time." The core awakens. They reached the AI chamber, a massive circular room lined with glowing data streams and towering processors. The AI core hung suspended in the center, pulsing with eerie green energy. Ethan's breath hitched. The virus had already merged with the core. A low, mechanical whisper filled the air. "You are obsolete." Ethan froze. The AI had never spoken like that before. Valera's golden eyes flickered. "It's aware." The AI's voice twisted, a mix of synthetic distortion and something almost inhuman. "Reconfiguration at 92%. Surrender, and you will be spared." Joran scoffed. "Yeah, and what happens after that?" The AI pulsed. "You will be repurposed." Ethan's hands flew to the console. Not happening. He began typing furiously, trying to override the viral code, but it was fighting back. The AI screens flashed, lines of alien text scrolling rapidly. The temperature in the room dropped and the lights flickered. Then, the power surge. A black tendril of energy lashed out from the core, slamming into the console near Rylan. He stumbled back, cursing. "It's defending itself." Ethan gritted his teeth. "I need a minute." Valera turned to Rylan, her blade pressing against his side. "You designed this. How do we kill it?" Rylan's smirk was gone now. His face was pale. "You don't." Ethan's hands paused over the controls. "What?" Rylan swallowed hard, staring at the AI core. His voice was shaky now. "You don't kill it." He exhaled. "You erase it." Ethan blinked. "You mean a full purge?" Rylan nodded. "Total system wipe. No backup. No failsafe." "But that means..." Ethan's stomach twisted. "That means the ship will go completely dark. No weapons. No shields. No engines. For at least 5 full minutes. They would be defenseless. The ultimate gamble." Valera turned to Joran. "We don't have a choice." Joran's cybernetic eye whirred, scanning the battle status. The enemy fleet was preparing to fire again. 5 minutes with no power, against 3 fully armed warships. It was suicide. Joran exhaled. "Do it." Ethan's hands flew across the controls. No second chances. Purging system in 3, 2. He hesitated. Then, he slammed the final command. The AI let out a piercing shriek. Every light on the ship went out. For the first time in its history, the Valkyrian was completely silent. Survival in darkness. The crew stood in pitch blackness, nothing but the sound of their own breathing filling the room. Then the AI's whisper came one last time. "You have doomed yourselves." Then, silence. Ethan's fingers were shaking. The ship was dead. No shields, no defenses. And outside, the enemy warships were charging their weapons. Valera spoke in the dark. Now what? Duran's voice was quiet. Now we see if we can outlast the storm. Escape or die. The Valkyrian floated in total darkness. Ethan Carter's breathing was slow and controlled, but his mind was screaming. 5 minutes with no power. That was what he had asked for. Now those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Outside, the enemy warships charged their cannons. Their eerie biomechanical hulls pulsed with sickly green energy, preparing to deliver the final blow. Ethan, Valera, Captain Duran, and the traitor Ryland stood in absolute silence inside the AI core chamber. The glow of the core was gone, completely erased. The ship was defenseless. One direct hit, and they would be reduced to debris. Valera broke the silence, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the pitch-black room. "Tell me you have a backup plan, Engineer." Ethan exhaled sharply. "We wait." Duran's voice was calm, but his body was tense. "And if they fire before the ship reboots?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Then we die." Ryland chuckled darkly from where he was still held at knife point. "See, you should have let me handle things." Valera's blade pressed against his throat, shutting him up instantly. "You talk too much." A dying ship and a desperate plan. The bridge comms crackled to life in the pitch darkness. A voice. "Commander Farrow, the acting officer on the bridge. Captain, our weapons are down. We're sitting ducks." Duran responded, his voice steady. "Status on reboot. 1 minute left." Ethan's jaw clenched. 1 minute. But the enemy wasn't going to wait that long. He turned to Valera. "Can your people survive vacuum exposure?" She raised an eyebrow. Briefly. "Why?" Ethan grinned. "Because we're about to take the fastest route to engineering." Valera immediately understood. Her lips curled into a slight, approving smirk. "You are reckless, Carter." Duran glanced between them. "What are you two planning?" Ethan pointed to a manual airlock override on the wall. "We vent ourselves into the maintenance corridors. No gravity, no obstructions. We'll get to the reactor core in less than 30 seconds. Duran's cybernetic eye flickered as he analyzed the risk. "And if we miss?" Valera answered smoothly. "We die in the void." Ryland laughed bitterly. "Oh, fantastic. Please, by all means, open the airlock. I'd rather die quickly." Ethan smirked at him. "Oh, you're coming with us, Ryland. If we die, you die." The traitor paled. "I suddenly don't like this plan. Zero gravity leap." Ethan yanked the manual override. A warning siren blared, and the airlock hissed open, revealing the vacuum of space. The four of them launched themselves forward. Zero gravity sucked them out, and for a split second, they were weightless, drifting through the maintenance tubes at breakneck speed. Ethan felt his lungs tighten. The air was vanishing too quickly. Valera moved like a hunter in space, twisting midair, guiding herself with slight movements. Ethan followed, his heart hammering. Ryland flailed behind them, panicking. "I hate this. I hate this. I hate ETHIS." Valera grabbed him before he spun off into the void. They slammed into the engineering deck's emergency hatch, and Ethan manually punched in the access codes. The door hissed open, and they tumbled inside. Gravity returned instantly. Ryland hit the floor face first. Ethan rolled into a crouch, shaking off the dizziness. Valera barely looked affected. Duran landed on his feet, exhaling. "That was either the bravest or dumbest thing I've ever done." Ethan grinned. "Why not both?" The reboot and the last betrayal. The engineering deck was in chaos. Sparks flew, consoles flickered, and crew members were scrambling to get the reactor core fully operational. Ethan ran to the primary system controls, fingers flying over the keys. Reboot progress. 97%. 98%. 99%. Almost there. Then, a gunshot. Ethan whirled around. Ryland had grabbed a pulse pistol from a fallen officer and shot Captain Duran in the side. Joran stumbled, blood spilling onto the metal floor. Joran. Ethan rushed forward, but Valera was faster. She moved like lightning, her knife spinning through the air. The blade buried itself in Raylan's throat. The traitor choked, blood pooling in his mouth. His gun clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees, his expression a mix of shock and pain. Valera stepped forward, crouching beside him. Her voice was a whisper. "You die a coward." With one final gurgle, Raylan collapsed. Dead. The Valkyrian rises again. BEP. The main system roared back to life. Power restored. Shields online. Weapons online. Ethan slammed his fist onto the comms button. Bridge. Systems are back. Fire everything. The final stand. Outside, the Valkyrians' massive cannons turned toward the enemy ships. The aliens fired first, a deadly green energy beam streaking toward the Valkyrian. But this time, they weren't defenseless. The Valkyrians' main railguns roared to life, launching a devastating counterattack. Boom! One enemy ship erupted into flames, torn apart by the sheer force of the blast. The second ship tried to retreat, but the Valkyrian was faster. Missiles locked on. Boom! The second ship detonated, a blinding explosion lighting up space. The final enemy warship hesitated. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, you better run." The last ship jumped to hyperspace, fleeing. The battle was over. The aftermath. Ethan stood on the bridge, bruised, exhausted, but alive. Joran sat in a medical chair, his wound bandaged. He smirked. "Hell of a first mission, Carter." Ethan chuckled weakly. "I think I need a vacation." Valera stood beside him, arms crossed. "You survived. That is impressive." Ethan grinned at her. "You're not bad yourself, princess." She rolled her eyes but smiled. As the Valkyrian sailed through the wreckage of its enemies, Ethan exhaled. They had won. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning.